The morning light poured through the towering windows of Whitmore Holdings, casting a golden glow across the polished marble floors. From the 35th floor, Manhattan looked calm and distant, almost peaceful. Inside the executive office, however, the atmosphere was always sharp and focused. Every movement had purpose. Every second meant money. Emily Carter sat at her desk just outside Daniel Whitmore's private office. Her posture was straight, her expression composed, and her schedule perfectly organized down to the minute. For 2 years, she had been the silent engine behind one of America's youngest billionaires. She handled negotiations, coordinated international meetings, and managed crises before they reached his desk. Calm, efficient, invisible. That morning felt no different, until the phone rang. It wasn't her direct line. It was the private office number. Very few people had it. Emily hesitated for half a second before answering. "Whitmore Holdings," she said smoothly. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then a male voice spoke, in Russian. Emily's expression changed instantly. Her eyes sharpened. Her fingers tightened around the receiver. And without thinking, she replied in flawless Russian, her American accent disappearing completely. "Yes, I'm listening." Inside his office, Daniel Whitmore was reviewing financial reports when he heard it. Russian. Clear, confident, unexpected. He understood the language well enough to recognize tension in a voice. He stood slowly from his chair and moved closer to the glass wall separating his office from the outer desk area. The blinds were partially open. He could see Emily, but she couldn't see him. Her tone shifted from calm professionalism to something more personal. "Urgent. I told you that's not possible," she said quietly in Russian. "Not right now." A pause. Her jaw tightened. "No. You promised me time." Daniel felt a flicker of curiosity sharpen into suspicion. Emily had never mentioned speaking Russian. In fact, her file stated she grew up in Boston, educated in Chicago. No foreign ties listed. No international background beyond business travel. On the phone, the man's voice grew louder, though Daniel couldn't make out every word from his distance. He caught phrases: money, deadline, consequences. Emily lowered her voice further, almost whispering now. "Please, don't involve him. He has nothing to do with this." Daniel's eyes narrowed. Involve him. Silence filled the room except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. Emily closed her eyes briefly, as if steadying herself. "I'll handle it," she said firmly. "But you have to trust me." Another pause. Then she ended the call. For several seconds, she remained still, staring at the desk. The confident assistant who controlled billion-dollar schedules was gone. In her place stood someone carrying something heavy, something hidden. She slowly placed the receiver back down. Daniel stepped away from the glass just before she looked up, returning to his desk as if nothing had happened. But his mind was no longer on numbers or contracts. Who was she talking to? What had she promised? And why did it sound like a threat? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emily entered with her usual composure restored, tablet in hand, voice steady. "Your 11 a.m. investor call is ready, Mr. Whitmore." Daniel studied her carefully. If he hadn't heard the conversation himself, he would never suspect anything was wrong. But now he knew. And whatever secret Emily Carter was hiding, it had just entered his world. Daniel Whitmore had built his empire on instinct. He trusted numbers, but he trusted people's reactions even more. And what he had just witnessed outside his office wasn't ordinary. When Emily stepped in to remind him about the investor call, she looked flawless as always. Her navy blazer was perfectly pressed, her hair neatly tied back, her expression neutral. But Daniel had seen the flicker in her eyes after that phone call. Fear. Not professional stress, something personal. He gave a slight nod. "Cancel the investor call." Emily blinked in surprise. "Sir, reschedule it for tomorrow." She hesitated only for a second before replying, "Of course." She turned to leave. "Emily." She stopped. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore." Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "Close the door." The soft click of the door shutting suddenly made the office feel smaller. Quieter. Daniel folded his hands on the desk. "How long have you been speaking Russian?" For the first time since she started working for him, Emily looked unprepared. Her calm mask cracked, just slightly. "I studied it in college," she answered carefully. "Interesting," Daniel said smoothly. Because that didn't sound like classroom Russian. Silence stretched between them. Emily's grip tightened around her tablet. Was there something specific you needed, sir? Daniel stood and walked slowly toward the window overlooking Manhattan. He kept his back to her as he spoke. I heard the call. The words landed heavily in the room. Emily's breath caught. All of it? She asked quietly. Enough. She closed her eyes for a brief second, as if this moment had always been waiting for her. It was a personal matter. It sounded like a threat. She didn't deny it. Daniel turned to face her. You mentioned someone coming to America. You mentioned money. And you specifically said not to involve me. His voice was calm, but firm. Why? Emily's composure finally began to slip. Because it has nothing to do with you. If someone is threatening my employee in my office, Daniel replied evenly, it has everything to do with me. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with frustration. You don't understand. Then help me. The tension in the room thickened. Emily set the tablet down on the desk as if it suddenly weighed too much to hold. The man who called, he's connected to people back in Moscow. Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. My younger brother owes them money, she continued. A lot of it. For what? A business deal gone wrong. At least that's what he told me. Her voice grew softer. Now they want repayment, and they believe I can provide it. Daniel crossed his arms. So you've been sending money? Yes. How much? Enough that you would notice if you looked at my bank records. Daniel's eyes sharpened. Are you being blackmailed? Emily hesitated. That's what it is, isn't it? They said if I don't cooperate, they'll come here. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. They know where I work. Silence filled the office. Daniel stepped closer. And what exactly did you promise them just now? Emily met his gaze directly. Time. Outside the window, the city moved as if nothing had changed. Cars honked. People hurried down sidewalks. But inside that office, something had shifted. Daniel saw it clearly now. Emily Carter wasn't hiding ambition or betrayal. She was protecting someone. And whatever storm was coming, it was already on its way. The silence in Daniel's office felt heavier than before. Emily stood across from him, no longer just the composed assistant who managed billion-dollar meetings. Now she looked like a sister carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes. Daniel studied her carefully. Start from the beginning, he said calmly. Emily took a slow breath. My brother, Alexei, stayed in Moscow when I moved to the United States 5 years ago. He always wanted to prove he could succeed on his own. Last year, he invested in a logistics startup with the wrong partners. The company failed. But the men behind it weren't investors, they were connected to organized groups. Daniel didn't interrupt. They financed the project unofficially, she continued. When it collapsed, they demanded repayment with interest. A very large interest. And your brother can't pay, Daniel said. No. And they made it clear that unpaid debt isn't just about money. Her voice trembled slightly. It's about reputation. Daniel's expression hardened. He understood the type of power, where fear replaced contracts. So you stepped in, he said. Yes. She met his eyes. I couldn't let them hurt him. Or my mother. How much did they want? Emily hesitated before answering. $2 million. The number hung in the air. Daniel didn't react outwardly, but inside he calculated instantly. $2 million wasn't impossible for him. But it wasn't about the money. It was about control. And today's call? He asked. They're losing patience, Emily admitted. They believe that since I work for you, I have access to wealth. They think I'm hiding resources. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Are you? No. Her answer was immediate. I have never taken a single dollar that wasn't mine. I would never risk my integrity. He believed her. That was what unsettled him most. He had worked with enough people to recognize deception. Emily wasn't lying. She was desperate, but honest. They threatened to come here. He asked quietly. Yes. Her composure finally cracked. They said if I can live comfortably in New York while they wait, they can make an example out of me. Or worse, out of him. Daniel walked toward his desk slowly, thinking. When he built his empire, he had dealt with ruthless competitors. But this was different. This wasn't corporate warfare. This was personal intimidation. You should have told me sooner, he said. I didn't want to drag you into it, Emily replied. You trusted me with your business. I didn't want you to think I was a liability. Daniel stopped and looked at her directly. You are not a liability. Her eyes widened slightly. You are my assistant, he continued, voice steady. You handle confidential negotiations worth hundreds of millions. You protect my company's reputation every day. If someone threatens you, they threaten my operations. Emily shook her head. This isn't your fight. Daniel's gaze sharpened. It is now. A long silence followed. I built everything I have from nothing, he said quietly. I know what it feels like to be cornered. And I don't tolerate bullying, especially not against people who work for me. Emily swallowed hard. What are you going to do? Daniel picked up his phone, his expression calm but decisive. I'm going to make a few calls of my own. For the first time since that Russian phone call, Emily felt something other than fear. Hope. And somewhere deep inside, she realized this wasn't just about protection anymore. It was about loyalty. And Daniel Whitmore never abandoned his own. The next 48 hours moved with quiet intensity. Daniel Whitmore didn't panic. He strategized. By late afternoon, he had contacted his private security director, a former federal investigator who now managed international risk assessments for Whitmore Holdings. Within hours, background reports were compiled. Names, connections, financial trails. The men pressuring Emily's brother weren't random criminals. They were part of a loosely structured but dangerous network operating between Eastern Europe and small business investments abroad. Daniel didn't involve the police, at least not immediately. Instead, he used leverage. By the following morning, two high-level attorneys specializing in international financial crime were reviewing the case. Simultaneously, Daniel's team quietly reached out to banking contacts in Moscow. Tracing the original transaction that had trapped Alexei. Emily watched everything unfold in disbelief. She expected anger. She expected dismissal. Instead, she saw efficiency. Why are you doing all this? She asked softly as Daniel reviewed documents in his office. He didn't look up at first. Because fear spreads if it's not confronted. That's not what I meant. Now he met her gaze. You're valuable to this company, he said simply. And you're not alone. By the second day, a message was delivered back to the men in Moscow, through channels far more powerful than a threatening phone call. The debt was being legally contested. Their unofficial contracts were invalid. And any attempt to harass or approach Emily on U.S. soil would trigger federal investigation and international financial scrutiny. Daniel didn't threaten loudly. He applied pressure strategically. Within hours of that response, Emily's phone rang again. Her hands trembled as she answered, but this time Daniel stood beside her. The same Russian voice spoke, but the arrogance was gone. The tone was cautious. After a brief exchange, the man ended the call abruptly. Emily lowered the phone slowly. They're backing off, she whispered. Daniel nodded once. They realized you're not an easy target. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but relief. What about my brother? She asked. He'll receive legal representation, Daniel replied. And we'll restructure the legitimate portion of his debt through proper financial channels. If he's willing to cooperate, this can be resolved. Emily covered her mouth, overwhelmed. I don't know how to thank you. Daniel's voice softened slightly. You already have. Loyalty is rare. In the days that followed, security around the building was subtly increased. Emily's brother was connected with a reputable attorney in Moscow. The threats stopped completely. For the first time in months, Emily slept peacefully. One evening, as the office emptied and the city lights flickered on beyond the windows, she remained at her desk finishing reports. Daniel stepped out of his office. You should go home, he said. So should you. He gave a faint smile. I own the place. She hesitated before speaking. You didn't have to protect me. Yes, he said quietly. I did. There was something different in the air now, not just employer and assistant, not just crisis management. Trust, respect, and something unspoken beginning to form between them. What started as a secret phone call in Russian had nearly destroyed her world. Instead, it revealed who would stand beside her when everything was at risk. And Daniel Whitmore had made one thing clear. No one threatened his people and walked away untouched.